Welcome back. Can't tell. Give everybody a second to get back here. All right. So I've got something awesome to share with everyone. I have to go in the other room for a second, but I'm going to play a quick video of the NFT that everyone who is at the event or contributed in our preseason is going to get. And so just one second, I'm going to go hit play.
Mikey, I'm so curious about the setup you have in that room.
All right. So we're all going to get that NFT of kind of the architecture phase. We all came in with a blank canvas. We made a sketch of what we thought could happen, and then we made it happen today. So nice work, everybody. All right. So here we are. We're talking about NFTs. We've got Jesse and Chase. First of all, I want to start this off by just talking about, hey, Jesse, a year ago, we were going on a walk and you started telling me about NFTs and why you thought they would work. And at the time I was skeptical. And I have since watched an entire year of every single news day, you being right. So tell me about what you thought NFTs were going to do.
So it's funny because when you talk about a year ago, I started messing with NFTs because I've spent a lot of my life just pretty much studying how status works, right? Like the two pedals on the bike as far as how humans are. It's like you program humans with stories, and you reward pretty much right behavior or punish behavior with status, right? So it's like you tell them a story about look both ways before you cross the road, then you reward with status. Hey, I'm really proud of you for, whatever. Makes sense? And so from a status play and a brand play, it just was like, oh, got it. Digital status, you can take your pretty much you can take your online, doxed or not identity and also reputation with you. Like all those things made total sense to me. What I understand now that I didn't really understand then is that traditionally I collected my background from an art collection standpoint is like obviously more physical art and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I thought originally NFTs were about art, and I didn't realize that the actual art is the contract. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that's the stuff you start to figure out the more you understand the ecosystem. And also, like the thing I was mentioning earlier, from a brand perspective, you start to really understand the dynamics of how everything rises and falls on the community, and also an urgency standpoint, right? Where, we're watching an entire new market emerge, and the things that are happening are so unprecedented, and at least for me, and so interesting, right? I sent this to Will earlier because I got Will into Bored Apes not too long ago, but like I sent this to you earlier, Will. But like this happened yesterday. Yeah, this happened yesterday. So this is just a stat to try to get people up to speed on like where this market's going. So yesterday, Ape, which is the Bored Ape Yacht Coin's coin, did $7.8 billion in volume yesterday. This coin is a month old. Now here, by comparison, ETH did 18 billion yesterday. So this new coin from what started as an NFT collection did 7.8 billion yesterday in volume. Right. And so if you pull up the chart from yesterday, everything is red except for one coin, and so what you're also going to start seeing in the NFT space is it truly is like, it's when you bring it all together, that's when it gets really powerful. So what you're starting to see is that projects might start as NFT, and then they start bringing in tokenomics, and then they start bringing in like DAOs. And when it all starts coming together, it really is a new way to build, in my opinion, all of the strongest brands for the next 15 years are going to come out of this space. And we're already seeing that. We're seeing people go from being struggling artists, in August, and then they launch, an NFT with these little robots. And then by October, they've got to deal with Netflix to turn it into a TV show. It's completely reversed the polarity of how the market works. It used to be if you had like IP, you would go and you'd try to shill it to, Disney or somebody, and you go through your publisher and your management and all that kind of stuff. It's completely turned where now it's the other way around, where IP has gotten so stagnant because pretty much Disney owns everything and it's all been consolidated, that all of a sudden there's this new appetite for new IP, and it's coming out of these NFT communities. And the reason that is let's say you own one of 10,000 of a collection. Well, in essence, if you're a collector and you own that and you're a part of that community, well, the stronger that brand gets, the more valuable your assets become, right? So in essence, if you have 10,000 NFTs, now you have 10,000 evangelists. You have a staff of 10,000 people that spend, some of these communities I'm in, they do 24-hour Twitter rooms for free. One of the communities I'm in is called Corky's, and they release someone in the community writes a new song about the NFT community and releases it at least once a week. A few weeks ago, a rapper took 50 names of people in the community and made an entire original song about the community and gave a shout out to everyone in that community. Well, what happens from an investor standpoint if you're, I don't know, like you're a mechanic in Ohio and you're part of this community that nobody really understands, and you get mentioned in a rap song? Do you think you're going to diamond hand that or just dip on that community? So what you're also seeing, just purely from a HODL perspective, is like people aren't emotionally attached to the coin, to their Ethereum, in the same way they are, your NFTs. And that's huge, because if you've been rocking like my Bored Ape, right? Like if somebody was to just come in and scoop that, all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, everybody online knows me as that, not this, right? And so all of a sudden you start to see, when the market's been going crazy, if you're in a blue chip collection, they're actually holding. And so there's a ton of psychology going on. There's the community aspect. There's also the IP aspect, which means if you own certain collections, you own the IP, which means you can license it, right? And so there's entire like cottage industry right now. CAA just actually opened up an entire division just for repping people's wallets to brands. So so all of those things have happened in the last year, and it's like every day it just keeps accelerating.
It's been a wild year and wild to watch you. And in the meantime, I met Chase online. Chase and I met through Twitter, and we started being part of the small working group that had like Ryan and Petar and some of these other folks in it. And Chase, you worked on a project called Info Token. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure, yeah. So I spend time in a few communities, but most of my time is in Info Token DAO. So Info Token is a 100-member DAO where each member holds one NFT. We're sort of like a sort of lab style where there's 100 kind of crypto, like we like to say, gigabrains, kind of constantly investing, trading, incubating new projects. So it's sort of a lab model where we're looking at a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm on the operations team there, along with Scouts and Schoolhouse. So Schoolhouse is kind of our education and community arm. So I'm kind of in a few different buckets there, and kind of play a general role in just helping our teams, helping form teams, helping our processes go forward. But at least as far as this conversation, I got to see kind of firsthand just the power of, from a free launch and kind of the initial community, and just living it from the inside, the level of zeal and alignment that this community has is unlike anything I've personally experienced. Like, I've been in some communities before, but it's just a whole nother level. And all, for myself, and also just see everyone else and how dearly they hold their NFT. And ours isn't even a PFP, so there's no sort of like social flexing or status kind of piece there. It's really just a collectible. Anyway, that's a bit about Info Token and my role there.
So to be specific, Chase, in order to be part of the group, you have to hold an NFT, and you could sell. Could I buy this NFT from you? theoretically?
Yeah. I mean, there's an open market on OpenSea. There's again, it's a pretty small supply. There's 100, I think, at any time. There's probably only 4 or 5, listed. It's at the point where most people really don't want to sell this. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you were to go on OpenSea and you're willing to pay the whatever 40 or 50 ETH or whatever it is. And so we have kind of a trickling of new members in, but it is
Chase,
a pretty
can I ask you a
solid
question
group.
real quick? Just because I don't want anybody to miss what you just said. Okay, so Chase just said there's only what, 4, usually 3 or 4 on OpenSea at a time. And can you just say it just so everybody in the back can hear what you said? What are the listings going for right now?
So right now, the floor is 50 ETH. I think we've
Which
gone as
would
high
be
as
in USD,
Yeah.
what would that be?
so 150K, maybe. I guess depends on the price of the day. We're nuking a little bit, so maybe we're at 140K or a bit lower. But
Okay, so call it
yeah.
140K. And how old is the project?
Yeah, so the project is a little more than 6 months old, so it's launched in the fall, and so had some kind of price appreciation early on, but it's really this year that we really kind of solidified the community and decent price run up. And so obviously I don't like to focus too much on price, but it's a huge lever for it's changed some people in the community's lives for sure. It's allowed people to spend a ton of time here, and just again, just kind of the zeal and conviction that we have, and that's a big part of it is the NFT price itself.
And the only reason I bring up price, because I totally get why you're hesitant to talk about that, because you're building it like a super healthy community, and that's not. But your original buy-in was.
Yeah, so it was launched for free. I did not get in there. I got in it was a few ETH at the time. I was kind of following the early community and was really excited. But yeah, it's been it's been a nice appreciation. It's been crazy to see, honestly. Like I think you could even ask kind of the early group there. I think nobody could predict or fully project. Like we thought we had a cool group here and we were going to do some cool stuff, but it's crazy looking forward. Kind of. It's just crazy kind of how fast all this happens, and then we're just moving forward every day, just growing faster all the time.
And I'm just trying to illustrate a market here is all I'm trying to do for folks. I promise I'll stop talking about the floor and stuff like that, Chase. But like you go from a free mint in 6 months to a 50 ETH floor, at a given time, maybe 3 or 4 of them are even available to join that community. The funny thing is, usually when I start talking about Web3 in general, people gloss over. And if I start talking about with the future of NFTs, as far as, your mortgage being on blockchain and all that kind of stuff, people just kind of go like, whatever. And I go, okay, did you hear what Chase just said? Right? Like this is really at the very least, you got to admit that's interesting. And I'd love to know, Chase. Sorry, Mike.
Go for it. No.
I haven't gotten to hang out with Chase, so I'm curious about. It's like, what would you attribute? Like, that's you have to have a loyalty at the center of this thing, and like a community at the center of this thing that makes people go, I don't even care about whatever I could get for this. I'm so bought in to the people I'm with. Can you help me understand how that happened, and what would you attribute that to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think most people would say that the community is so important to them. It's sort of like a family or a home base, at least for part of their life, to such an extent that I think most people just don't even. It's sort of invaluable. It's sort of like it's hard to part with. I think the other thing for Info Token is, along with general community and belonging, like I could sort of say the objective value of the information and alpha, if you want to call it that, and just connections that I've gotten and we all have are so. I see information and sort of relationships and things every day that I far beyond what I had seen before, and it's almost beyond what I would imagine. Like I feel lucky to be here with this set of people and to work on cool stuff, and so. Yeah, I think it's, certainly like some people always want to take liquidity, understand like for their point in their life, but for the most part, it's just, it sort of builds into your like daily rituals and daily routine. It's almost, it's sort of, I find it just like taking up more and more of my life, almost kind of living in communities like this. It's very, just the energy is infectious. I guess I didn't really answer your question. I don't know the exact kind of state. I think it's mostly though just feeling that alignment with other people and the energy that sort of compounds, like we're all kind of helping each other. I guess one more thing I would add is just, I've seen over time, IT started a bit more like an alpha group, a bit more like cutting mercenary type of a group, like we're helping each other kind of trade, but it's expanded way beyond that at this point. I mean, like we're sort of, it's more of a general community to help each, like squad wealth, happy, healthy, wealthy. I like to think about that with squads. And it's almost like everything's on the table, and viewing it more more sort of like, kind of journey through life together. We have this resource of 100 people, and it's nice that the community's small enough where you can really get to know people well.
It's amazing. And does everybody know when Chase says alpha, does everybody know what he's talking about? Or could you define that just for folks maybe that don't know?
Yeah, just alpha is like generally information that you can leverage for financial gain. So we have every sort of, we have DeFi experts, NFTs. It's just a whole just fire hose of information. And I would say for myself, again, like that's not just kind of the soft side of community, but I've been able to leverage a lot of this information and stuff to financially, benefit quite a lot. And so that's just something like when we look, I think when you look at these NFTs, when you look at these high floor NFTs, I think the initial thought can often be like kind of like just shock, like how could you possibly imagine? But when you start to kind of unravel all the layers of value, or at least what I feel are the layers of value there, it's again, I'm very biased, but I almost feel like the floor could be even much higher. Like I think we're going much, much higher. And it's not just based on this kind of hype. Like I can really point to these specific events and these specific things that have unlocked for me. So,
so a lot of folks have
Can I
questions.
answer someone's question? Somebody just asked, what is the floor? That's the cheapest entry. So if you look at a collection, and let's say there's like Chase, you said there's only 1,000 or 100?
Yeah, 100 for at least for this specific NFT, 100 supply, and then the floor is just whatever the lowest available listed price is. So obviously they're changing all the time, but that just gives a general sense for the market value of an NFT.
Nope.
And so this specific NFT is a ticket that allows you to participate in this group. So having this NFT in your wallet, if you sold that to somebody here in this group, what could they do now that they have this ticket?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, if I went out 5 minutes from now and I sold it to someone else, I mean, I would lose access in the Discord. I would no longer see all those opportunities, and they would get into this token gated Discord. So there's a whole bunch of stuff bundled in there, as I call like alpha. We also have the like venture style investments that come through. And so you're seeing a piece of that, and just the variety of like events, connections, and just basically everything inside the community. So that's a ticket to kind of the Discord, but I think that kind of undersells it. It's really just everything that we're doing. This is a membership into all of that.
And I think that, like, Chase, correct me if there's a better way to say this, but when you think about NFT, yes, you have art. That's for sure there. But like I always say, the art, in my opinion, is the cover letter for the contract, right? The contract, the underlying contract is the most important thing. So when you're looking at these and evaluating these, going, wait a second, what rights do I have? So all of a sudden, Chase is like, remember, so an NFT it's the art, sure, it's a contract, it's also a key to a door, right? It's multifaceted kind of asset, which is why it gets kind of tricky when you're first getting into it, if that makes sense. So it's also now all of a sudden, if you're part of some of these communities, they're also pooling funds, right? And they're sitting on large investments. And they're some of these funds, they started buying heavy this time last year, and they've 1,000x their investments. And if you're a part of the DAO, that also increases obviously the investment. And plus it's also like you said, Chase, it's also kind of like a I don't know, a sorority or fraternity. Like you're a part of this group. Like I once was watching this thing, and it said it's something like less than 1.5% of people in the UK get to go to Cambridge or Oxford. and it said, but did something like 70% of everyone in parliament went to there, 90% of the bankers in the top position. So it's one of those things you also get once you're in these communities. It's just like, a church or these types of things where you go, oh, we have a friend of ours that's sick, and people go like, oh, well, what can we do for him? And they put in money to help. Like, all of those things happen inside of these kind of gated communities too, which is also, part of the value.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what you see here is you have these communities that are being built around NFTs. What is an NFT?
I think Professor Dr. earlier explained it really well. I mean, her presentation was great. So it's non-fungible, right? In essence, like it's digital ownership. When Will said Web 1 is read, and then Web 2 is read write, Web 3 is read write own. The closest in Web 2 that most people can usually correlate to an NFT is, do you own your .com? So if you own, I don't know, MikeyAnderson.com, that was the closest you could get to like digital ownership. Whereas now, because of blockchain, you have provenance. The trickiest thing about classically investing in art, we just saw this with that Da Vinci painting, where it sold for whatever, 150 million or whatever. And now they're like, we actually don't think it was him anymore. And you go like, oh, okay, that's not helpful. So now that you can go back to the genesis of a project, and you can see at some points when Chase said he came in at 2 ETH, it went from this wallet to this wallet to this wallet to Chase's, and it stayed there. And then Chase gives it to his kids in 50 years, and you'll see that exchange happen. And then 1,000 years from now, if you wanted to, on the blockchain, you could look up and go, at one point it went from here to here to here. And then you actually have a chain of custody, which allows us to prove, in essence, provenance and digital ownership. And so now that means, well, what can you, this is one thing I always talk about when I'm talking about people about Web3 is like, use old stories to explain new things, right? So when I'm talking to people, at least here at the agency, I'll say things like, do you know what a ledger is? And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, these are ancient. It used to be, I owe Chase $5. I better remember that. And then at some point I go, wait, how many, was it 5? Was it 6? And Chase is like, hold on, you owe me 10 barrels of wheat, not 5. So we started writing that stuff down so we can go back and look at it. And that evolved to the point where all of a sudden we had databases, right? But the problem is, whoever owns that data, anybody seen the end of Fight Club? Remember the end of Fight Club when they blew up all those buildings? Why did that matter? It mattered because if you wipe out the database, you wipe out the ledger, the record, right? And so somebody, well, we know we don't know the person, but all of a sudden you start going, okay, is there a way to do this in a decentralized way so one person can't go into the actual original database and change it, right? We started seeing 2008 where people couldn't find their mortgages, blah, 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 right? And then you couldn't find a way to kind of keep your property, all that kind of stuff. So it's like, you already understand ledger, right? And I go, cool, if you have a ledger, now you need a contract, which is I need a contract between me and Chase that says, if I don't get him his 10 barrels of wheat or whatever, right? Cool. And then the last thing is we need a way to exchange that, a monetary exchange. And I go, so all of these things are ancient. The only thing with Web3 is now we're just doing them in a decentralized way. That's all. So there's, because it's people, the on-ramp is so big and the language is so confusing that people just check out. If they understood that they actually understood all of these concepts already, it helps you go, got it. Yep. Okay, was anybody in your family ever part of the Masons or a church or went to Oxford or any of those kind of things? You know those communities and how they all had secret handshakes and kind of knew each other and they go out of their way to help each other? It's kind of like that. Also, you ever heard of an investment group? Maybe like a group of venture capitalists or anything? You ever heard of something like that? It's kind of like that. And then you go like, you ever heard of collecting artwork? It's kind of like that. So everything that's happening is just 5 degrees off of what you've seen before. Mm-hmm. It's just that simple, right, Chase? It's as easy as that.
Yeah, I think sometimes when people are being introduced, I think you hit on it there, but I think comparing to the current state of things like Web 2, where we have all these things that we interact with that again, it feels like we own, but we don't. So if you have your profile, so again, this is similar to the Fight Club example, but if Twitter were to blow up or go out of business, or more likely like just change their terms of service or change their approach for whatever reason, like your data is completely at their whim. And so for some people, like this is their whole life. There's the famous Vitalik example of the World of Warcraft, changing his character, that's a little more, that's a little more of a fun example. But if you think about like people, I think it's a good analogy just for generally like how you can get rugged on just any of these items online from Web2 gatekeepers. So Web3 really is this view of the web that starts with user-owned objects, and then we build applications around them, as opposed to the other way around, where everything starts with sort of these gated platforms, and then our data just sort of lives there and it's more rented.
Yes, that's amazing. That's a great way of saying it. Here's the crazy thing. You know how well we've been conditioned to this stuff? We go on every day to platforms we don't own, and we put all of our intellectual property into them, and they reward us with some dopamine. And we've built, I mean, I don't even know if you were to gather up how many billions or trillions of dollars worth of value we've created, and we don't own any of it. Now we can. A person I talked to a lot in one of my communities, she was a wedding photographer, and she always wanted to just be an independent photographer. And she started getting into NFTs, and she sold her first big NFT was a photo, and it was a beautiful photo, but she sold it was like over $100,000 is what she ended up getting at the end of it. And the beautiful thing about it is, remember, it's a contract. Every time it exchanged hands between now and as long as the blockchain's up, right? That wallet will get 5% of that in perpetuity, irregardless. And that's huge. So all of a sudden she had that one sale, and she's like, now I can stop doing wedding photography and I can really focus on doing the nature photography I like. She has a one-to-one connection with her customers. Now you've got all these, now a bunch of people are buying her photos, and every time they exchange value, she gets an upside, right? And you look at that and it's like, it's a wonderful thing. And now she can just go full-time on art and all that kind of stuff. And the cool thing is it's a trustless system because it's in the contract, right? She's going to get paid. All those horror stories, if you have a background as an artist, I came up as a filmmaker where you go, hey, I'm supposed to get this many points on this movie. And they go, oh, well, you didn't see the accounting? And I go, well, what do you mean? And then by the time they show you the accounting, you end up going, actually, we lost money. You lost money every month off of everything. There's a classic case on this. It was for Golden Child, where it was the biggest movie in the world at the time. And pretty much, I think it was the writer was supposed to get like 5 points on it or something. And so it made like some ungodly amount of money. And then when he went to go get his check, they did all this, what do they call it? Like creative accounting. And they go, yeah, well, on paper, we made $100 million, but in reality, we lost money on Golden Child. And it turned into this whole fight where this stuff started getting exposed. In essence, if there's a middleman, there's also a chance that somebody's going to take the value you've created. And most of us, it's hard because we have somebody between us and success, right? Taking a piece. Let's say you spend a year on a painting. Do you know how much most galleries get? 50%. You spent a year of your life, you took on all the risk and liability, right? And they take 50%. If you do that as an NFT, OpenSea takes what, 2.5%? And then you see an upside of it forever. So what that means is if you're a middle person right now, record label, art broker, all that kind of stuff, you better find a new and interesting way to actually create value for your artist, because they're starting to figure this stuff out, and it's going to change the entire game, right?
So like, I play a video game called League of Legends, and I'll buy skins for my characters, right? Like I've been playing this game for like 10 years, love it. But I can't take that skin anywhere, right? Like I bought it, but I'm basically renting it from this group. So you're saying that NFTs are objects now that I own. What can be done? Like if you get an NFT, what are some examples of NFTs that start out as just being a JPEG, and what comes from it over time if they're done right?
Oh man, like the stuff that's happening right now is so next level. And Chase, please jump in if anybody. There was a group I've been following for a long time called Artifact, RTFKT, like Artifact, if you want to look them up. And I started really getting into their stuff when they did this collaboration with a guy named Jeff Pigeon, who's a skateboarder and things like that. And they started talking about how they're going to do this thing called Clone X. And so Clone X were these fully rigged 3D characters, and they were going to have in essence, they were going to, from day one, they were going to be fully rigged so that next time, if you're using Zoom, you can drop in and your character will be your face And so while you're talking, and there's voice modulation and all that stuff's coming, so you can literally be your character. On Snapchat, if you saw that person walking down the street and you turn your camera towards them, you just see their avatar, you don't see them, right? And they're teasing all this stuff and they're doing all this stuff. So they finally get to the point where they're about to launch Clone X. They launched Clone X, which was really successful. And then I think it was a week after they launched, it was announced that Nike just bought them. The coolest thing about this story is I think one of the founders, it was January of last year, they did an article and they said, hey, it was a group of friends, small group of friends that we're going to start this. And they said, our dream is hopefully we'll make enough noise someday to be able to get our own shoe at Nike, like to be able to design a collab and do one shoe with Nike was their dream. Fast forward to November, they got bought by Nike for an undisclosed sum. If you look at the banner of Nike, it's the Nike logo, Jordan, Converse, and them. That company is not a year old, right? And if you pull up the prospectus this year of Nike, you know, the number one sector they think that they're going to see their growth in, it's digital objects. By who? That group of friends. And right, and what they just launched a couple of days ago is they had this thing called a monolith, which is this cube, right? And inside of it, it opened up and it was the first pair of Nikes. And these Nikes also came with a vial. And depending on which vial you got, the cheapest vial is 1 ETH. The most expensive vial is 200 ETH. So if you happen to open up that vial, you could have gotten what? I mean, what's the ETH at right now? 200 ETH, what would that be? If I don't know.
200, that's
600 grand or something.
Yeah.
And that little vial clips into the front of the shoe and the entire shoe transforms and takes on that shape. Now, if you have Snapchat, you can also look at those shoes on your feet and all that kind of stuff. And you can take the vials out. In the future, they said there's be jackets and you plug it into your jacket and your entire jacket changes, right? So in essence, they're becoming the hype beast outfitters for the entire metaverse. And that company is less than a year old and they got acquired by Nike. And now they're as big of a deal on the banner as, I don't know, how old's Converse, right? So that's this year. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're ignoring this space, it's like, okay, right? Like when I say the Bored Apes are the most successful startup in history, like in history, think about that, right? And then they launched a token. And if they launch this new marketplace, which they're supposed to be launching.
Before you say that, if you had bought in the very first,
if you would have bought literally last week, a year ago, if you bought a Bored Ape for $300, you'd be up over $1 million. And then tomorrow they're launching land in a metaverse, which by the way, remember how, okay, let's just say traditional market. Zuck is a pretty smart person. What did he just change? What did he just bet the entire company on? What did he change the name to? He changed it to Meta. Why? What does he know? Are you going to bet the most successful social media platform in history on something if you don't know what's coming? Right? So he changes the name to Meta because he's trying to own the metaverse. The problem is it's not a decentralized metaverse. It's the same old shit. It's just weaponizing data against people and all that kind of fun stuff. Right? And so the metaverse that's about to come out tomorrow, literally tomorrow, if you had an OG ape and a mutant, you're airdropped, which means given free land. These things called airdrops. It means they just give them to you. Right? And now you own property. It's kind of like if you were buying, I don't know, real estate in Manhattan 200 years ago, right? If their metaverse ends up catching, this stuff could get really interesting really fast because now what you have is all these brands rushing in from Gucci to Louis Vuitton to Nike to Adidas to everyone else. And they're going, we need land in this space so we can put up our shingle, right? All of that's happening right now. And it's happening at like light speed. A week in the NFT space is like, I don't know, Chase, like trying to keep up with what's happening in this market is beyond ridiculous. Like there's a thing we always talk about on the marketing side where there's going to be more change in the next 10 years than there was in the last 100. Right? Think about that. Think about everything that happened in the last 100 years. We're going to have more change than that in the next 10. Right? And this market is where you're seeing it's the reinvention of clothing. It's the reinvention of IP. All of that stuff is happening right now in a decentralized way, right? By companies that didn't even exist a year ago.
It's just a complete change in how we do everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're talking about how, like we're literally saying nouns, like just the idea of a singular noun can be now built, made, and owned on the internet. Right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I mean, the Nouns DAO,
yeah.
I don't even know what it's up to. Chase might. Do you have any idea what the Nouns are up to? Their treasury?
I'm not sure. I haven't kept.
Oh, I thought you were talking about
like
the
you can
Nouns.
actually own an object on the internet.
Yes, right.
That was never possible before.
Well, so there's actually a DAO called the Nouns,
Mhm.
and every day there's an auction. And at least last summer they were going for something like $200,000 or $300,000 a day. And their whole treasury, all of a sudden the big investors started coming in. After about a month, you started seeing the people that were buying every day was like some of the biggest investments firms in the world. Because if you own one of them, you have a vote on what happens to this DAO. And I think by the end of the summer, there was 600 million worth of ETH in there. And they realized this is going to be $1 billion fund in the next like 12 months. And the entire goal of all that money inside of that fund is to make Nouns the most valuable asset on the planet. And I remember there was actually a vote up in the DAO to build statues of Nouns in every major city, because their whole thing was, we're going to make the thing you have the most valuable thing on the most valuable IP on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't even looked at Nouns since last summer, but I'm sure it's just gotten crazy with their treasury.
Yeah, and so we have this interesting space where the new networks of the future are being bootstrapped today, right? Like Facebook and Twitter at one point in time, people were like, how could they be raising all this money? Why does this make sense? Like, this is wild that these people in Silicon Valley are making so much money. But the investors looked at it and said, like, I know that networks, this is going to be the network of the future. Right now, these NFTs are representing a promised network of the future that these creators are using those funds to build roadmaps and execute on.
Correct. It's the birth of brand. Like, this is where the brands are going to happen. A16Z, where they led the round, the $200 million round for Yuga, which owns Bored Apes. A16Z led that round at a $5 billion valuation. And if they sell out, which they will, because they're breaking the internet, the reason why the market's down in NFTs is because everyone's pulling liquidity to buy land. They're going to raise over $300 million tomorrow. And by the way, every time one of those pieces of land exchange hands, what's you could get 5%? I think it's 5. I don't think it's 10. Clone X, it's 10. So just like that photography, I said, every time it exchanges hands, and this is happening like a stock. So it's happening constantly all day, 24 hours a day around the world. And they're taking a rake of 5 to 10%. That's why last year they did, I think, 200 million at a 95% profit margin. Yuga did. Right. So it's interesting at the very least.
And so we're at this weird spot in time, because in the comments, people are like, there's this feeling of social inequality, right? Like clearly we don't have an equal social structure today.
Okay, here I'll tell you how I think this happened. You say this all the time.
Yeah.
The world right now is monopoly, and all the spaces have already been bought up. This is what happens when
people can't even buy more spots unless you have enough money.
This is what happens when people are greedy and hoard wealth for a long period of time. You start getting people going, fine, if I can't win your game, I'm going to create my own. So Chase and other people like us go like, you know what? I'm going to get together with some friends and see if we can collectively work together to at least have a chance at this, because no one else is going to let you win. So we're going to kick in the door. It's a digital form of Bastille Day is what I think you see happening. So most of these people that are doing NFT projects are going, I tried to get a job, doing artwork for Facebook or whatever. And because I didn't get to go to college, I didn't get in. So I said, screw it. I'm going to do my own collection. And I did $30 million last year. And now I'm building my own digital school to give away art for free. Right. Like, that's happening in real time right now. And so I think personally, it's a response to Web 2 economy. It's a dragon with its gold. And as our friend Bryan always says, dragons don't even need gold. Some of these organizations have so much money they're sitting on, right? And then college is getting more expensive, and all these things are happening. You go like, what do I got to? Wall Street Bets was the very beginning, where you started seeing people go like, you know what, you're right, I only have $500. I'm going to bet it. And then people go, why? If you lose that, it's like, I already have nothing. So if I lose everything, and if $500 can hurt this big organization so that they can feel a little bit of the pain, I'm fine with that.
So who is those organizations? Like, what are you talking about?
You're talking about all the classic Web 2 brands and just, in general.
People bought GameStop and they basically pumped GameStop up to be massive. And that was kind of the beginning of NFTs, right? Like in a way.
I mean, literally, no. I mean, NFTs were around before that, but like,
As a market.
it's when you started. I think honestly, it's the decentralization piece is the piece that people are really missing. Like the fact that you can have a like something like Raid DAO or Raid Guild and stuff, like the fact you can now run companies and have them decentralized, and guess what, it works. That you don't have to have someone at the top siphoning out all of the value from all the people that do the work. Like that's possible now.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And so all this new economy is happening because it's actually creating value and it's rethinking how things go. It's kind of like if you're a traditional investor and you completely like didn't pay attention at all when the internet started. And then you go, I'm looking at all these things happening on the internet. No one's going to buy clothes on the internet. Who's going to buy, you're going to buy food on the internet? That doesn't make any sense. You're going to buy a car on the internet. I'll believe it when I see it. Like all of that stuff, right, is happening right now in this space. And it's funny that people can't see the parallels, right? I don't know, Chase, did you have any? I
wanted to ask Chase a specific question following up on that. So Chase, a small group of people got together to start Information Token because they basically saw like, hey, we can win together. What did that look like in the early days? How many people? What did they do?
Yeah. So we started with so there was sort of there was an initial drop of 20 and then they added 80 later. So it kind of started as a very, very small community and then they layered it on top. Of course, I wasn't there for like that origin first days, but I was there pretty early. Honestly, in the beginning, it was a lot of just like, hey, we're all here. We have a very similar interest. So so the whole community was based on this origin story, which was based on one of the founders. Even though it's a DAO, there's still sort of a founder or leader figure. And the origin story was basically this research to identify Sybil attackers of the ribbon airdrop. So this is like so let me just explain like briefly. So there are people who kind of game the system of airdrops, and so there's this airdrop coming, and there's lots of people who through advanced tactics, like they sort of siphon up all the airdrops that are really meant for like genuine users. And so this made for like a very powerful origin story because it was someone kind of shining the light on this kind of sketchy behavior, and it's very much looking out for kind of the individual user or the small person. Like, as you know, this kind of behavior is mostly done by whales. And so anyway, I just mentioned that to show like, so that was kind of a rallying point, and it attracted a certain type of person that I think was kind of, they're interested in the investing side. They're ambitious, but we were very much like interested in sort of like growing wealth. It's sort of in the right way together. And so at the beginning, it was kind of just like, hey, we're all here together. Honestly, it wasn't like we just hit the ground like running. It was a lot of it was sort of just like talking, like, what do we want to be, and kind of hanging out together. And as we started to learn, and as we started to kind of learn each other more and play around with different ideas, that's when we sort of started to formalize a bit more in terms of investing. But I would just say like a lot of it was just sort of this initial like experiment, and the story really brought this sort of obviously we're all different. There's actually a good amount of diversity like in different ways in Info Token, but we're sort of bonded around this general desire to make DeFi more sort of fair and transparent and win together. And so it was cool to see. And again, it's kind of crazy to kind of see today and then look back.
What's funny is when Chase talks about that, Chase, it feels like the way you're talking about that is like you're talking about an institution that happened like 30 years ago. It's like our forefathers came across on the ship or whatever. It's like, yeah. That was 6 months ago. It just is an example of how fast the market moves.
And it wasn't like,
also here, let me say this too. If you want to understand how this stuff works, read the story of the Stone Soup. If you've never read Stone Soup before, you should read it, right? That's what's happening, where all of a sudden, hey, I got a carrot. I got a background in finance. Oh, really? I have a background. I'm a marketer. Oh, that's cool. What do you guys got? And then all these people get together and they all just make soup and then everybody eats, right? That's how most of these communities are. And the crazy thing is these people I hang out with like all day long. I'm probably on Spaces 4 hours a day. If I'm doing email, I'm listening. I'm a part of these communities. I don't know 90% of their names, and it doesn't matter.
And they're not rich people.
No, they're becoming rich, but like that's not how it started.
Yeah.
And that's not even, most of them don't even, here's the thing. If you don't have anything, and if you get stuff, a lot of times you're like, oh, whatever. I still just want to hang out with my friends, and they helped me and I helped them. And, you know,
Yeah.
it's funny because if we see each other in real life, we still use the other person. Like, I have a friend named Crusher. I know his real name now, but if I'm going to see him in New York for NYC, and I'll be like, hey, Crusher, I don't even think about his actual name. Like, you know, and that's what's cool about this. I don't know how old people are. I don't know race, religion, none of that stuff plays a role at all in these communities. It's like amazing.
Yeah. And like
I just see a cartoon monkey, or I see you know, a cartoon like of a squiggle or whatever. It's like, that's how you think about these folks.
and different people have different personalities. And so
Oh,
some folks,
yeah.
NFTs might not be the front door. NFTs might happen once you understand, once you're in a DAO or something like
That's
that.
right. And so what
So-
the big thing to understand about NFTs is it's one piece of an ecosystem.
Yeah.
What you're finally starting to see is it's like, yeah, there might be an NFT. So maybe it's a DAO, and then they introduce an NFT, and there's a DeFi element. Again, now you're starting to see them all click together. So yeah, like Bored Apes started as like an NFT, and then they an NFT, which by the way, part of the roadmap from the beginning was to turn this into a DAO at maturity and give it back to the people that own the NFT. And then they launched their coin. And then, so it's like, you're seeing all of the pieces, the Web3 pieces are finally starting to come together in these communities.
Yeah.
And that's what makes them so powerful.
And so you're getting ready to create a new front door for new people to learn about this and have a group almost like Chase. Are you
Oh, yeah,
comfortable talking about it?
Sure. I mean, if somebody wants, like, so the biggest problem with this market is I spend a ton of time in this, and I can really only track 2 projects, because where most of, like Chase earlier, he used the word alpha, where most of the kind of here's what's cool and what's going on happens. It happens in a Discord, or it happens on Twitter Spaces. Those are pretty much where most of the conversations happen. So imagine if Steve Jobs, you're like, oh, hey, he came on Spaces last night. He told us about this new product he's launching in 2 weeks. And then because of that, everybody went and bought the stock. Imagine if you weren't in the room for that, or what advantage that is. That's why these alpha rooms are so helpful from an investment standpoint, everybody watching out for each other. And what we've been trying to figure out is just a group of people in the community is, how do we get that out to as many people as possible? Because like Gary Vee said, the amazing thing about NFTs is the potential. The problem with NFTs is that 98% of them are garbage, and they're just rug pulls, they're scams. So even friends of mine will be like, should I get in NFTs? And I'll be like, no. The amount of time you have to spend in market to really get it and know what you're getting is a lot. If you're not a part of a group like Chase's, it's very difficult, right? Because it's kind of the Wild West. None of this is regulated. And so what we're creating is a thing called Alfie, which in essence is, it's Wikipedia, it's Glassdoor, and it's IMDb, and it catalogs and logs every major collection. So if right now, if you said, okay, I want to go learn about the history of Bored Apes and how they created the fastest growing brand in history, I want to like look at their roadmap of how they did it, I'd be like, you can't. You have to go to McKinsey or somebody and ask them to create like a prospectus pretty much on a collection. And so people like Kevin Rose has that. I think he has 4 full-time analysts that are, you know, world-class analysts just going through and evaluating projects for, if you're a owner of his NFT, the Moonbirds, right? And I was sitting there and I watched that happen. I was like, I personally think it's bullshit. The guys like Kevin Rose seems like a nice guy, but that he gets 4 full-time analysts. And then if you're a school teacher and you're trying to get involved in NFTs, you have zero access to that information. And so the thing about it is, all of these communities that we're talking about that are running rooms like 24 hours a day, none of those people are on staff. Those are just community members that love the community so much. They're constantly in Discords. They're running these spaces. They're connecting people and onboarding people to their brands. And so all we're starting is, in essence, we're building the shell, kind of the Wikipedia Glassdoor side of it. And in essence, we're asking the best community members of those communities to come in and fill those pages out. And if you fill those pages out and help us keep those pages up to date so people can go and read them and make sure that things are above the board and they're not going to get wrecked, then that gives you a whitelist spot, and also means you're a part of the DAO, which means as we all come in and update these pages and help keep everyone informed, we're building a database, and it's owned by and incentivized for the people that actually keep the database up to date. And then half of the information, the most pertinent stuff that will keep you from getting wrecked, as far as somebody went through the contract and it's a clean contract, like basic perspective stuff, like this is what the project is, these are the founders, here's their background, here's other projects. That stuff is all available to free to everybody all the time. The deeper dive stuff, as far as like, here's every email they've ever sent out, here's the background, the stuff that honestly, like if you're Pepsi and you're going, should I do a partnership or something, that deep dive stuff, that's behind, I guess, the paywall, which you have to have an NFT for. And if you have an NFT for it and you're contributing, you're also earning status and tokens in the DAO. So in essence, it's like, I mean, we're starting it, but nobody really, I mean, the DAO owns it. In essence, it's like if Susie updates it more than anyone else, she'll end up being the biggest shareholder. So what we're going to do is, so in essence, we're working with these different community managers from all these major, we're gathering them now, all these major projects. And we're like, hey, every day while you're on Spaces, can somebody open up their laptop and just keep everybody up to date? And so that'll be a decentralized database that will hopefully in some ways start to regulate this market without actually adding regulation. And it will create value for everybody that maybe you don't have a lot of money, but you can go in and help us all stay up to date because we weren't on Spaces or in Discord. Does that make sense?
That's cool.
So that's one of the things we're trying to do to try to level the playing field in this space, and also just kind of keep everybody in the loop, because I love the space, but I mean, when I say it's the Wild West, it's the Wild West.
Yep. It's the Wild West, and we're just over on time. So Chase, do you have any parting words for everyone?
I think one thing I would say is that like you can definitely learn a lot about NFTs sort of like by listening to others and reading material. Like I think that I do think that's a good way to start. But I think at least for me, the biggest thing was I guess I would encourage people to just spend a little bit of time in some of these communities, take a look at ones that you resonate with. And I think it will, I feel like that's a real, it will give you a totally different color, I think, on the NFTs. Like living inside the communities, I think it really, at least for me, it transformed the way I thought about it. So just encourage people maybe to take a look at different communities, see what speaks to you, and maybe spend a little bit of time there and see what happens.
Super nice to meet you, Chase.
Awesome. Thank you
too.
both.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, it's fun.
Hope to see you soon on future talks like this.